What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Well, we got some breaking news. Bill Belichick is the next head coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels. Bill Belichick, who has been in the National Football League since 1975, spent 50 years in professional football. I would consider, I think many would as well, the greatest coach of all time, definitely the most accomplished coach of all time. 6 Super Bowls as a head coach, multiple Super Bowls as a defensive coordinator, famously the guy that took down some of the greatest offenses we've ever seen in the 80s as Bill Parcells' right-hand man against Bill Walsh, against Jim Kelly in Buffalo, will go to college. And if I would have told you when he got fired, mutually departed, left New England, which, listen, Andy Reid left Philadelphia. Bill Walsh quit on the night. Like, coaches don't coach forever. Players don't play forever. It always ends, right? This isn't like a family where your kids are your kids till the day you die. Like, you're kind of hired to be fired. Bill obviously went a lot longer than anyone else. But if I would have told you a little, I guess it ended for Bill. They didn't miss the playoffs about 11 months ago now, that Bill would be a head coach in 2025, technically hired in 24, but you know what I mean. Where would he land? I think most people would have said the Cowboys, the Eagles, maybe the Jags, right? If I would have thrown the curveball, said he's going to be a head coach in college. Bill Belichick's not going to come back to the NFL. He's going to go to college. Give me 5 guesses. You would start doing mental gymnastics, right? You'd be like, well, maybe Michigan's one and done. Would he take a Southern job? Hard to see him at like Florida, or maybe Kirby left and Georgia high. You would have thought Texas, could Sark go to the NFL? Lincoln Riley, you wouldn't thought I don't know. Not in a million years. If I would have given you 100 guesses, I don't think you would have guessed North Carolina. And it's not a crazy story today because we've been hearing about this now for, it feels like a week, definitely 3 or 4 days. And when Bill went on Pat McAfee, the way he discussed it, it was clear, like, this is not fake. He's really interested. I was listening to Coward today with Rosillo, and Colin's like, you don't have a 5-hour meeting with any human being if it's not serious. If you have a 5-hour date, like, it's going pretty well. If you have a 5-hour business deal, especially in a situation like this, like, you start discussing money after a couple hours of like philosophies and big picture thoughts and what you think of the program and going back, and eventually it's like, well, how much are you going to cost? What do you need? What's your budget? Right? What do you need for NIL? What do you need for your staff? How much do you cost? You start going through this checklist. And Bill is a guy, his contract with the Patriots was always a little like cloak and dagger. It was kind of hard to ever get to the bottom. A lot of people thought it was 20, 25 million. Obviously, he was making a lot of money. He's made a ton of cash. Rumors always had it that his buddy Ernie Adams helped made Bill a lot over the decades in the stock market. Ernie's like this genius who just happens to love football. And Bill Belichick's now is going to college. And I was telling someone this yesterday who was asking me, picking my brain about the podcast world. Former radio guys, going to maybe dive head first into the podcast world. And I said, I think an element to podcasting that I see going up and up, and this guy loves college football. I think college football, which is clear, the number 2 sport in America, is only going to continue to grow. The popularity of the sport because of NIL and because of the parity, it's not just Alabama, Ohio State, LSU every single year, or Georgia. It brings a lot of other people into play with the expanded playoff, with even the best teams this year, Texas, Georgia, Ohio State. They're pretty flawed. To me, they don't hold a candle to like last year's Michigan team, some of Saban's teams. Any Georgia fan would agree that this Georgia team isn't remotely as close to as good as the one that won back-to-back national championship. That team went like 2 deep with NFL players. So the parity of this sport has kind of transitioned into what? The NFL. And obviously, the consolidation of conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten financially are so big. Well, the ACC is somewhat on the outside looking in the sense that their top teams wanted to get into the SEC, and it felt inevitable that like Clemson, Florida State, and those schools would go to the SEC. Well, North Carolina would probably be part of that package because of what they brought to the table with their basketball program. Now you elevate the football program. If I was part of North Carolina basketball, whether I was the head coach, whether I was one of their big boosters, whether I worked around the program, I would have been on the horn to Bill. Like, what can we do to help you out? I remember a couple years ago when Kentucky was having a fantastic year in football. Calipari said, I'm their biggest fan because when they do well, they lift us up financially. And this is just a crazy story. I mean, it's a wow moment. And there are a lot of different angles here. I think one thing is clear, and you learn this when you're young, and the older you get and you got to make tough professional decisions. Sometimes, like, one in the hand is better than a couple in the bush, right? And I think in this situation, it was pretty clear. Bill looks at the landscape and goes, there's no guarantee I'm going to get a football job. Zero guarantee. I mean, last year, he had one interview after an awful season. I remember when I got fired, and I guess Andy got fired before I got fired, but when Andy got fired right after the 2000, would have been like 2012 season. So in 2013, he started interviewing with everybody. It was like the Cardinals want him, Chargers are sniffing around, Chiefs are interviewing him. Like, he had the pick of the litter. Could have gone here, could have gone there. And he was just coming off a 4-12 season and had never won a Super Bowl at the time. Now, there was a different kind of aura around Andy. Easygoing guy, easy to get along with. People had positive things to say. There was obviously a lot of negativity surrounding Bill because of how it ended in New England, how he kind of operated like a dictator, how he wouldn't listen to anyone, how he consolidated all the power to him. And for 20 years, it worked. And then the last couple were pretty ugly. There's no disputing that. But I don't care who you are. Most coaches go through some rough times. And to be a year later and go the NFL just essentially punted on him seems a little crazy. We saw the dudes in Atlanta, the front office and their president wanted no part of them. How's that going? 6-7 with a quarterback who looks terrible. Chicago this year, they have a coach opening right now, and they have a lot of good talent. They are not going to be interested in them. Why? Kevin Warren. And Bill wouldn't be interested in them. Like, the only way he would take that job, and rightfully so, even if he was cool with like, hey, listen, I can work with another GM, but I can't answer to that guy. Not going to do it. He's not going to take the Saints job. The Jets job, he despises Woody Johnson. You know, it looks like the Cowboys, Mike McCarthy, as sitting here December 11th, you would bet on McCarthy coming back. You know, Sirianni, we'll see. You know, the Eagles, this A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts story comes in, but they've won 9 games in a row. And they have a decent chance to be the number 1 seed. The Lions are playing the Bills this week and still have to play the Vikings. So there's no guarantee that they're even going to win the division, let alone be the number 1 seed. So if the Eagles were to win this week, they're in great position to have the number 1 seed. So that just buys Sirianni at minimum that extra week going into the second round, even if he were to lose. Like, the Eagles aren't even close to even making that decision, where they were one of the teams that were seriously interested in him last year. And if Sirianni had had a bad season, like, I wonder if he doesn't take this job. And who knows? Maybe he's not that interested in coaching Jalen Hurts. I don't know. But that's not really an option right now. So you look around the landscape, you're like, yeah, it might not happen. And at my age, if I'm Bill, 72, 73 years old, I can't afford to do this. And then I look at college, I'm like, advantage me. All these college coaches hate when you got to pay players, when you got to acquiesce to agents. Who has Bill been dealing with for 30, 40 years? Agents, people demanding money. He's comfortable in that environment. That's when I was in college football, I always aspired to get to the NFL because it was so cutthroat. If a guy's not good enough, you cut him. If you want a sweet player, you can go buy him. If you want to do something bold, you can make a trade. It was professional football. And college football has become that. You could argue it's a little out of whack right now, but listen, I think it's advantage Belichick. And when I see people saying, well, Saban had this and he wanted out, because Saban, while he coached for a couple of years in the NFL with Bill, he had been a college guy for so long, since the late 90s up until last year. He had gotten used to playing in the rules of the previous life, pre-NIL, where his program, and let's face it, guys still got paid brown bags, but give a guy 30 grand here, give a guy 50 grand here, give a guy a Tahoe here and a Suburban there. Now it's like, hey, coach, I'm getting offered $1 million. We talked about this on the podcast yesterday. South Carolina, their star defensive player, middle of the season was like, he's going to need a raise because it's year to year, which Bill is not going to be used to, but he's going to be comfortable in this money environment. I think this is one of the all-time coups for North Carolina. There is zero chance. Like what Colorado needed from Deion is what they got immediately. Relevance. Just that alone was really important to their program. And obviously he brought Shedeur and Travis Hunter. Last year, while the record wasn't good, what they went 4-8, and they were pretty bad down the stretch, Deion's value to them was really, really high. And then he doubled down because this year he showed, like, listen, guys, I know what I'm doing. I can coach. Deion was a no-brainer. But let's face it, we didn't know, like, is Deion a good enough coach? Is he? And he proved he is. Like, there is no disputing when Bill Belichick coaches a game against, you name it, Duke, Florida State, Mario Cristobal. Now, he's going to have to improve the roster. And I would imagine one of his big conversations is, what is my NIL budget? His son, Steve, who I would imagine is going to be reported is going to come with him, is coming from Washington. And he's very close with Jed Fish, where he spent a ton of time with Jed at the University of Washington. Well, my buddy Guy Haberman, who I did a podcast for a long time, calls games on the Big Ten Network and has called Washington games. And last year, Jed, they didn't blow a lot of NIL money. They saved like their $12, $13, $14 million for this transfer portal to kind of feel it out. But my point with this story is that Bill knows, give or take, like the amount of money you need to go land sweet players. Like, I don't think he would take this job if he didn't know the amount of NIL cash he had ready to spend, because it wouldn't be worth it. Like what Kenny Dillingham is going through at Arizona State right now is difficult. He had a remarkable season, but he's begging people for money. He's like, guys, this is not sustainable. If we don't get more money in here, we have no chance. We got lucky. We landed a couple, scattaboo from Sac State. It all worked out. But if you want us to keep winning 8 to 10 games every year, I need more money. He kept the program alive a year ago with $1 million. Like, it's not feasible. Not when you want to compete against Miami, Texas, Georgia, Bama, LSU, Ohio State, and Oregon, Michigan. Michigan just gave a guy $12, $13 million. Now, it's not all up front. Obviously, these deals are all, but Bill clearly feels comfortable. Give me enough money, I can figure this out. I will be ready to roll. And the one thing I've always heard about Bill, and I saw it firsthand with Andy, work ethic. Like, these guys can work for 20 hours a day. As Phil Savage, who's now the interim GM of the Jets, once told me about Nick Saban, and I think these guys fall into this as well. When the football season starts, whether it's college or pro, in training camp, they can get on this football treadmill and just keep going till the cycle ends. And in the NFL, that's usually the draft, right? In college football, it's like up through recruiting, little break till spring ball. But it's like they never skip a step, and they just go, and it like energizes them. I remember thinking when I work in the NFL, like, it's like week 3, I'm like, I'm exhausted. How do these guys do it? And there's this life that they get from football. Football is crack, and they are crack addicts. They are addicted to it. And I said this, and I noticed this about Bill this year. I don't know. I don't have access to Bill's bank account, just like no one does. I would imagine 9 figures in accounts, in brokerages. The guy is so fucking rich. He does not need another penny in life. Yet his desire to do all these jobs, to break down film every week at NFL Films, to go with Peyton Manning and Pat McAfee, he loves it. It is, beside probably his children, nothing is even remotely as close to what the joy he gets from football. Coaching football, building a football team, being around football players, preparing a game plan, getting ready for a game, going to practice. I'll never forget when I first got hired at Fresno State. Pat Hill, who got hired at Fresno State from Bill Belichick's staff. The number one thing that always stood out to me was how much he loved practice. I mean, loved it. And every good coach I've been around, from Andy Reid to Deuce Staley to Matt Nagy to Sean McDermott, those guys get so energized going to the practice field. It's like their spot to do their art. That's where they are most comfortable, and meeting room. But just coaching and doing football. Everything around football. Because at the end of the day, they're not that much more different than me or you. They just love sports. And the sport they love the most is football. And then they develop this incredible skill to coach football and game plan football. So Bill's advantage, like the team with the most going for them, is Miami. They have a ton of NIL money. Their coach can really recruit. But you know what Mario can't really do? Is coach. He's not good with schematics at all. Honestly, they have one of like the fakest 10-2 records. They easily could have been like 7-5. And it's not from a lack of talent. They got a bunch of ability. That is never going to be the problem with Bill. Because Bill is one of the only coaches in the history of the sport who could be a position coach for literally every position and be the best position coach. He could be the best quarterback coach, the best line coach, the best D-line coach, the best kicker and punter coach. He can coach it all. So he has this elite way of being a CEO, but also being able to like do an offensive game plan, do a defensive. He can do anything. And his undoing in New England was, listen, it was time for a change. He obviously drafted some terrible players, but it'll be interesting to see what a staff is at North Carolina. But I know this, every time he takes the field against the ACC teams, like if this was the equivalent of North Carolina in the SEC, I'd say it would be really difficult to get his roster good enough to compete and their coaches, from Kirby to Brian Kelly to Lane to DeBoer. Like these guys have been in it for a while. They know the landscape of the conference. It would be, I look at who's the best coach in the ACC. I thought Norvell, and then I watched this year was a fucking embarrassment. I know it's not Mario. He might be the best recruiter. He's definitely not the coach. You could argue it's Bill O'Brien. How did Bill O'Brien get famous? He worked and learned from Bill. So I've seen a lot of takes like, this is crazy. What's he doing? This is about a guy who is addicted to football. And this isn't the type of guy either to mail it in. That's sometimes you get with college coaches. Like, let's face it, Mac Brown, was he the biggest grinder? No, he was not. Steve Spurrier wasn't the biggest grinder. But you know what Steve Spurrier was great at? Recruiting. And pre-NIL, recruiting really mattered. Obviously, at Florida, he dominated. But when he went to South Carolina, he resurrected the program. Well, how did he do it? Because they went through this historic run for like 3 years where some of the best players in the country came from that state. And he landed them all. From Clowney to Marcus Lattimore, the running back, to Gilmore. I'm pretty sure all those guys were South Carolina guys. It was a perfect time, and they had like back-to-back 11-win seasons. If NIL didn't exist, Lane Kiffin would not have a 9-10 win team every year. Probably be closer to 5 or 6 on average. I'm not saying he couldn't have individual seasons. This completely kind of levels out the playing field, which is advantage Belichick. And I just think, listen, the popularity of college football, buckle up. Because I think, we talk about this a lot with podcasting or kind of the digital space. We're so early into everything. I think the popularity of college football, of its explosion into like NFL light, we're pretty early on in that. The difference is we have decades worth of history with these programs. Now, are things going to change? Are they going to go professional? Are they going to separate from their school but still be? I don't know where we're going. I don't know how this is all going to end. But Belichick's comfortable when there is money involved. Like, and it's above board. Like, I can pay you this. This is what I think you're worth. I place a value on this. Because the NFL, pro sports in general, is a lot like finance, right? You think a stock's valuable? Why? Because at this value, I think it's undervalued. I want to sell this stock because at this value, it's overvalued. No different with companies. Hey, we can fucking buy YouTube for $1 billion if we're Google. We think in 10 years, that could be worth $50 billion, right? But there are some companies like, yeah, this is not valuable. If we pay for this now, the way the market's going, it's going to go the other way. And that's what Bill, for 20 plus years in New England, was a lead at. Yeah, I don't want him at that price, but I love him at this price. Yeah, we love this player. He's a really good player. He's a Pro Bowl for us, but I don't think he's worth giving a second contract to, so we trade him for a first rounder. You can't let the last couple years taint your vision of a guy who made some great moves consistently to keep the dynasty rolling. Obviously, he had Tom. Obviously, he valued that. But what did he see in Tom? What did he see in Julian Edelman? What did he see in McCourty? What did he see in all these guys that he built, like the characteristics of a human being? And part of recruiting, I saw Kenny Dillingham say busing with the boys. Taylor Lewan, I guess, makes sense, played with him at Chaparral High School in Arizona. They were high school teammates. And Dillingham was telling him, listen, I think it's easy in recruiting to take the word of someone else. be all over this guy. He's a really good player. He could help you. From a high school coach, from another college coach in a transfer portal. He said, in my 2 years here, and really since I've been recruiting, I don't do anything without spending time with the guy and getting to know him and having a one-on-one conversation. Whether that's flying him to me or Zoom a long time, but I had to interact with him. Think of all the guys for decades Belichick has interacted with. Not just, Tom Brady and Lawrence Taylor, some of the greatest players of all time, but like role players, guys who were wired the right way, guys who know what it takes to win. Now, it's a little harder with a 17-year-old, right? Or an 18-year-old. But like if you're Belichick, are you even high school recruiting? That's a little hit or miss. You're probably hammering the transfer portal. And I would imagine one thing Bill has done this year is spend a lot of time evaluating college football. So it's not like he's going into this blind. He has a pretty good idea who can play, who can't play. Who does also Belichick know? Literally everyone in football. Bill Belichick is one of those guys, if you're in the football industry and you send them a call or a text, you get a call or text back immediately. I said this when Andrew Luck was hired as the GM, and he's basically running Stanford football. I mean, even I think the coach answers to him. If Andrew Luck calls you and you're a Stanford booster, if you're a former Stanford player, you, within 5 minutes, you're calling him back. And listen, most of us, we don't have that. I've texted a lot of people to come on the podcast. I don't get a bunch of texts back. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'm not an immediate text back. Honestly, I'm no different. Some people text me, I don't immediately text them back. Colin Cowherd texts me or calls me, I call him right back if I miss the call, right? So it just depends. That's the level Bill's on. And here's the other thing. What does every kid worth their salt want to do in high school football or a transfer portal guy? Every kid. I saw it when I was at Fresno State. Every guy that's going to play Division I football thinks they're going to the NFL, whether you play at Alabama or whether you play at San Diego State. If you are a legit player and you aspire to go to the NFL, which again is every single one of them, who would you want to play for? Kirby Smart and Ryan Day and DeBoer and all these guys can say, well, I put Brian Kelly, I put this guy and this guy. Bill Belichick says, I have won this Super Bowl, this Super Bowl, that Super Bowl, this other Super Bowl, this other Super Bowl. I lost a couple Super Bowls, but we were in the Super Bowl. And yeah, you want to play in the NFL? You want to be an all-pro? You want to be a Pro Bowler? You want to get second and third contracts? I know exactly what it fucking looks like. So these college coaches can get you to the NFL. Do they know how many of them have ever coached in the NFL? I spent 50 fucking years and I dominated everyone at the highest level. And listen, he's most associated with, and rightfully so, Tom Brady, who right now, more than Mahomes, more than anyone currently playing, is easily not only the most famous football person, college or pro, he's the most famous football player of all time. And Bill Belichick is literally most closely associated with that guy. And while it ended a little weird, clearly Tom goes over and over and going to be one of his biggest proponents. I would imagine hey, I got a quarterback. Call Tom. Now, is Bill the recruiting element? I thought, and I hear a lot of people asking this, how is Bill going to go into a living room? I think it's totally fair. I think that's a fair question. And then I saw Albert Breer came up on my YouTube algorithm. And Albert was talking, he was doing a radio hit with the big radio station in Boston. And he said that Deion Sanders has not sat in one living room because recruiting has changed. When I hear this, they pick you, I did a rant on this on the podcast a couple weeks ago when recruiting opened and signing day happened. It's I chose Michigan because of the colors, because of the history. No, you chose them because I gave you the most money. This is very black and white. This isn't complicated. There aren't a lot of variables here. It's pay to play, which is right up Bill Belichick's alley. So my overall reaction is this is awesome. This is badass. And this gives us a new team in college football that we're going to have to watch immediately. And unlike years past, this is why Lincoln Riley gets so much shit. This is why Brian Kelly's taking heat. Before, it would take you several years. Couple recruiting classes develop. You can flip the thing around immediately. You can be good right now. I mean, immediately. Elko went to A&M. Boom, they're good. Bill O'Brien went to a shitty program in Boston College. Boom, 7 wins. Probably could have been 9. You could flip things around. Kenny Dillingham, within 2 years, he's in the playoffs. Like that. And I wonder if that clearly, Bill, I think if he had his choice, he would have stayed in the NFL. But I don't think he was willing to risk, like, I'm going to get shut out again. Fuck this. I'm going to North Carolina. And then we'll see how it plays out with his son. If he's, the coach in waiting, we'll have to see. But it wouldn't shock me at all if he gets the band back together with all the boys. Wouldn't shock me if, like, Mike Lombardi is his GM. I would imagine Mick Lombardi will be on the staff. Josh McDaniels would have to be in play. Patricia, all of his guys. So my overall takeaway is this is really fun. And that's what sports, like, this shit's fun. This is enjoyable. And I think putting Bill Belichick at North Carolina now makes the ACC more interesting, because the ACC wasn't that interesting this year. I love football. I watch it all day, Saturday and Sunday, and Monday night and Thursday night. I mainly watch the good Big Ten teams and the SEC. Occasionally watch Clemson, but, like, the ACC kind of sucks. Hell, I watch way more Big 12, I feel like, this year than the ACC. And part of that is, like, I just don't think Mario's any good. Now, his team was pretty entertaining this year, so you ended up watching Miami games. Florida State 2 years ago was really good. They were unwatchable this year. But if you're Mike Norvell and you're Mario right now, this is not ideal. If you're an NC State head coach, Duke, I just saw, got a big transfer from Tulane today. This is not a great day. This is not a great. You would rather play Mac Brown every day of the week and twice on Sundays than William Belichick. So congrats to North Carolina. It's not a regret. I don't really regret things, but one thing that sucks for all you watching that went to big schools, there's such a connection and a passion. And when I went to the Red River game this year and saw everyone that went to Oklahoma, saw everyone that went to Texas, whether you're literally at school there at the time or whether you're an alumni and you're my age, the passion you share. I know so many people that went to Oregon or SC or UCLA, and even when your team suck, you're just connected to that program. Like at Cal Poly, I just do not care. And once they didn't rehire my guy Fresno State, like, kind of out on them too right now, pissed at them. Like, I don't have that. And I can't imagine being a North Carolina alum, which, let's face it, most of your life, if you're 40 years old, has been basketball related. But now it's like, wait, we got a basketball team and we got Bill Belichick as our coach? We got Bill Belichick coaching our football team. Like, this is a real thing that happened. Like, Bill Belichick, week 1, 2025, is going to be our head coach. Sign me up. Name me another coach. And I saw, it's like, well, shouldn't they have just hired this guy or that guy? I would hire Bill Belichick all day long. Listen, Matt Campbell did a great job at Iowa State. He's doing a great job at Iowa State. If you told me I'm North Carolina, who would I rather have today? There's not a question in my mind. I'll take Bill Belichick. Unless I get like Nick Saban or Kirby Smart, a guy that I know can dominate immediately. Obviously, there's some questions. Is it going to work? I wouldn't bet my life savings that he's in the playoffs in 2 years, but it wouldn't shock me at all. Like, my over-under on them next year would probably be 7.5 wins. I bet 7 to 8 wins. They're not going to suck. They're just not going to suck because he can control his roster more now. And if a guy sucks, he can get rid of. In football, you're kind of stuck. Once you make a bad draft choice, you're kind of stuck. You're not stuck in college. Yeah, make a bad draft choice, boom, he's gone. Mac Jones isn't good enough, boom, here's another quarterback. In the NFL, you're just kind of stuck for a year or two, maybe 3. In college, like, boom, transfer portal after spring ball. I bring a guy in to start spring, he's gone by the end of spring. That's how fast things turn over. Someone told me a story about a guy that early enrolled. So he literally left high school early to early enroll. He was in the transfer portal by the end of spring. That's insane. I mean, but that's what's happening. And right now in the wild, wild west, well, what's Bill? He's kind of a guy from the wild, wild west. He's not a big rule follower, which I can appreciate. One of the reasons I'm no longer in California and here is a little more like the wild, wild west. This is more my vibe. Kind of fucking, you can push the envelope a little bit more here. You used to be able to do that in California. The California my father grew up on in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, a little different now. It's like, I'm not big on fucking rules. Bill's never been either. And guess where there are no rules? It's why did he always butt heads with Roger Goodell in the league office? Fucking hated him. Because they were always forcing him to do stuff that he's like, this is moronic. Guess where there are 0 rules right now? It is literally you do whatever you want. Like Silicon Valley in the 90s. Fucking have at it, boys. Do what you want. That's one of Bill's greatest strengths. Why? Because he's smarter than most people. So I'm all in. I, I, I'm not saying they're going to win the national championship or anything, but this team's going to be good next year. This team's going to be good next year. Playoff good, I wouldn't go that far. And even when they add people, it's hard to tell with high school and transfer portal guys. But I would imagine within a couple years they're competing in the ACC. And awesome for Bill, taking a chance, mixing it up. Most people, I don't think most guys in his shoes would have done this. I really don't. Pete Carroll's in his shoes. He's not doing this. Like if Pete Carroll wanted some of these jobs, he could probably get them. And it feels like maybe he's just retiring and cool with it. Maybe he's hoping Lincoln gets fired in the next couple of years and take that job and kind of do a Mac Brown to USC. But very, very exciting. As just a football fan, a football lover, a lover of big stories, a lover of headline news, this is cool.